No, how long?
I was there about a week.
Yeah, yeah. Gosh, it's just like doing the shuttle now. Must have been an honor to go about with a man with the credentials of Israel Shahak, if I may
Well, yes, we've known one another for quite a long time, since the early 70s.
He goes around with Mr. Chomsky a lot.
Yeah, in fact, I was the first person to bring him over to the States.
When I did that book,
on the lecture tour.
Jewish history, Jewish
religion,
3,000 years.
The weight
of 3,000 years.
Right.
Yeah. Welcome very, very much to Conversations. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Norton Mezvinsky, who is a professor of, a professor of history, and is the co-author of a book. And here, maybe we can show it right here at the outset. It's just about in the stores now as we talk. This will be aired in September of 1999. But let's let them look at what it will look like on the stand. It's called Jewish Fundamentalism in Israel, and it's, the co-author is Norton Mezvinsky, we're speaking with here, and it's co-authored by a legendary figure, intellectual legendary figure in Israel, Dr. Israel Shahak. And Norton, welcome very, very much to Conversations.
Thank you for having me.
And by extension, Dr. Israel Shahak, welcome very much to New York City in your writing and so forth. And
thank you.
Thank you. I wonder maybe you could. We're going to talk about the book, and there's a lot in it. I've read it with great interest and so forth. But how about yourself? Talk about a little bit about yourself, share a little of your own background, and then we can go into the, what you and Dr. Shahak have discussed in this book, because it's an extremely important subject. But share a little of your own background for us, okay?
I'm an historian,
right,
and I deal with modern Middle East, mostly with Arab-Israeli conflict, Zionism and Judaism. I teach courses that are within the context of modern Middle East. I teach a course on Arab-Israeli conflict. I teach a course on American policy in the Middle East since 1947. I teach a course on Judaism. And I also teach a few things that deal with immigration in the United States. I don't teach them all in the same semester.
I see, yeah.
But
that's a lot to chew, yeah.
But that's my framework.
Yeah, you've done that, yeah. You were at Harvard? No, where did you do your work?
I did my Ph.D. at the University of Wisconsin.
That's right,
and then after that, I went to Harvard on a post-doctoral grant.
Right.
And then in the 1980s, I went back to Harvard for a year or so as a fellow in their modern Middle East research center.
Right.
But I've been a professor of history at Central Connecticut State University since 1967.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. A long time. You got that road well trod up between here and Connecticut. Huh?
Well,
yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah, they got a fellow out there. What's his name? Paul Moeller's got this machine that you'd be interested in, where you can go up on the air and go through, and you'd be able to get up there in about 15 minutes if that ever comes into the market. But I wish him well. But as he calls it, the sky car, where you can go through the air. But anyway, you're doing that, and then you've written on these subjects, and you were associated for a long time, if I'm not mistaken, with Elmer Berger, right?
I was indeed.
Yeah,
I
was the grand man. He's
Elmer
passed.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. In many ways, he was a mentor of mine.
He was. Yeah.
That's right.
Did you study with him formally, or?
Well, no. Actually, I came to know Elmer Berger when I was an undergraduate, and I did an undergraduate history honors thesis. And lo and behold, I discovered for the first time that there was such a thing as an anti-Zionist American Jewish organization called the American Council for Judaism. I then wrote a letter to Dr. Elmer Berger, who was then the executive director, to get information, and he supplied information, wrote me a long letter, wrote a comment on what I wrote. That's how I met him. And then through the years, I became closely associated with him, and he taught me a great deal.
Yeah, right, and he was there. Okay, some background and so forth. And then you put me, I'm very happy to say, you put me in touch with this giant of an intellectual, Dr. Israel Shahak, a couple of years, 3 years back when he wrote that
Wonderful
book.
Man.
Yeah, and he'd written that book, and we did a program. We're real happy. And when he comes here, for those of you who are viewing may not be directly aware of it, he travels very, very closely intellectually, and they're great close friends with Mr. Noam Chomsky, who has a tremendous following here in the United States, and it's richly deserved on his part in terms of understanding intellectually what's going on in the world.
That is correct.
Must be an honor to have written a book, co-authored a book with a man of that stature, an intellectual of that stature.
It's an honor to work
with him. Talk a little bit about how the book came about, and what, maybe we could start addressing what's in the book then.
Well, it came about because both of us, Israel Shahak and myself, were good friends. We're very good friends for quite a long time. But both of us, throughout most of our lives, have had this deep interest in Judaism.
Yes.
We have not only studied it, but we've done a good deal of research, and we, both of us, have on our own parts written and published a fair amount of material also.
Mm-hmm.
And so we, in the course of friendship and discussion,
Mm-hmm.
We came up with this idea.
Mm-hmm.
We not only of doing this book,
Mm-hmm.
and the book really is a book that fits not only our interest in Judaism,
Yeah.
but also fits our interest in Israel and political life within Israel.
And it's
because
very
the two
timely.
things go together.
Yeah, and it's very timely now because
It's very
the tension is building between, if I may, obiter dictum a little here, between secular and fundamentalist Jewish elements within, or Orthodox Jewish elements within Israel is a big issue there, and it should be well understood here, no?
It is a very big issue. It's an issue that has been an issue since the State of Israel came into existence
yeah.
in 1948, but
Yeah.
it's also an issue that has grown in importance and expanded.
Uh-huh.
And expanded.
Yeah. Okay, why don't we begin with the beginning? Jewish fundamentalism. What is Jewish? We hear a great deal in the news of Islamic fundamentalism,
We do.
Christian fundamentalism even, and that sort of thing. Jewish fundamentalism. What are we talking about when we talk about Jewish fundamentalism?
Well, I'd like to say first, as we say in the beginning of this book, that one of the reasons we wrote the book is because there is so little known outside of Israel itself and outside of certain pockets of extremely religious Jews in other parts of the world, New York, for example. There is very little known about Jewish fundamentalism. There is a good deal that is known by now, about, as you said, about Christian fundamentalism, certainly, and about Islamic fundamentalism. So we, believing that this is a very important topic,
Yeah.
not only within Israel, but for Jews outside of Israel as well, we decided to write the book. And Jewish fundamentalism is really a belief or a set of beliefs of a goodly number of Jews who are in Israel called ultra-Orthodox. They are Orthodox Jews. There are various categories of these Orthodox Jews that fit into the context of religious fundamentalism or of Jewish fundamentalism. In Israel, these Jews are not only fairly large in number, and they are not only significant religiously, but they are, as they have been since the beginning of the state of Israel, the modern state of Israel, they are also important politically. And in many ways, they exert political influence far in excess to their actual numbers in the Israeli Jewish population. And so we decided that there should be more understanding of all of this, especially in the parts of the world outside of the state of Israel. Deciding that, we then went about putting this book together, writing this book.
Ultra-Orthodox, Orthodox, fundamentalism, these are tied together. Orthodox, we here in the United States think of Orthodox and we think Reformed and conservative and the other kinds of things. We tend to be more secularly oriented than is the case, or is it is it more influential, the Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox, or what's the other term, I don't know, fundamentalist kind of Judaic view? And then it's also wrapped up with the term Hasid, the Hasids. Could you put some of that into perspective for us? Because many of the people here in the United States, they're Jewish, but they're not, or many of the people that are not Jewish don't understand the difference between the fact that the different groups that are Jewish, and that there's a great deal of difference between the way they see the world.
I'll begin with a comparison, since you referred to it, of the United States and Israel.
All right.
It's true that in the United States, we have divisions of Jews. There are, of course, a goodly number of Jews who are simply not religious.
Right, right.
But for the ones that are religious, to any extent, we have various categories. You mentioned the three largest categories. Orthodox being the smallest of the three,
right.
And then conservative and reform. Then there are offshoots of these groups as well. In the state of Israel, the situation is far different. In Israel, the breakdown is there are Jews who are religious, and then there are Jews who are not religious.
We can't apply that to the United States?
Well, it's different within Israel because for the Jews who are religious, those Jews all fit within the Orthodox category, or let me say almost all of them. There are precious few Reform or conservative Jews within the state of Israel, and the only branch of Judaism that has official standing in the state of Israel is the Orthodox branch. There have been attempts in the past 2, 3, or 4 years to give some official standing to the very small number of Reform and conservative Jews within Israel, but for the most part that has failed. Now, for the breakdown of the population in Israel, we need to say a bit more. There are those who fit within the religious category who are indeed most religious in terms of belief and practice. Then there are ones that we might call traditionalists who are not so strict in regard to their practices, but when they go to the synagogue, for example, they go to the synagogues that exist, which are indeed Orthodox synagogues. Again, with the exception of very, very few that are Reform and conservative. But there we're talking about a minute percentage of synagogues and or of Israeli Jews. So the division in Israel is either a two-way or we might say a three-way division. The two-way division is a division of those who are religious and those who are secular.
Right.
The three-way division may be those who are secular, and then for those who are religious, we have the most religious, and then we have the traditional.
Okay, and then on top of that, we have the traditional Ashkenazi, and then you have the Sephardic, or now, which I guess I seen in your book first time I realized, or Oriental they're being called now. That was in Hebrew that was Spanish. The Sephardim. You know.
The Sephardim from originally from Spain. But yes, that's but we have that division of Ashkenazim who are Jews who either themselves or their parents or their grandparents came from Europe, largely Eastern Europe. And then we have those who are the Sephardim or the Oriental Jews who either themselves or their parents or their grandparents came from the parts of the world that are in the Middle East, including North Africa, and or much further back in history from Spain. Now, the Ashkenazim and the Sephardim, or the Oriental Jews, within those groupings, there are, of course, both religious and secular. And so when we in our book on Jewish fundamentalism, when we talk about the fundamentalists, the very religious, we do indeed make reference to and discuss in some depth both those religious Jews who are Ashkenazim and those religious Jews who are the Sephardim, or as they're also called, the Oriental Jews.
Okay. Now, when we talk about fundamentalism, or let's just begin with the Orthodox. Okay. When we talk about that, let's talk about, and you talk about the halacha. Is that the pronunciation?
The halakha.
Halakha, which is the law, and you also talk about the Talmud. I hadn't realized the Talmud, which is the study of the Torah, and that there was the Babylonian, and then there was another, and the Babylonian is the one to which they do. And do the Orthodox have a particular tie upon a long historical tradition that's been there for over thousands of years? And is there a division there within Israel, that Israel was founded by secular-minded people, and is it the division between the secular and those people who are tied to those ancient roots that is a thing that divides the people, or that should be understood?
As a good conversationalist, there are a good many points that you've just raised.
I know.
So let me try to...
But you can just sort of chew on
I
it.
understand.
Yes, right.
I understand. Well, first of all, halakha, Talmud, and Bible. Let me start with those three concepts that are terribly important, not only within Jewish fundamentalism, but within Judaism more broadly defined.
Right.
The halakha is, as you mentioned, it is the Jewish religious law.
Right.
And the halakha, for the most part, is found in the Talmud. The Talmud that was written during the first 5 centuries of the Common Era. The Talmud is, for Orthodox Jews, for traditional Jews, the Talmud is the explanation, the further explanation of the Bible. Many volumes, over 60 volumes, large volumes, complicated volumes of explanation.
Yes.
Now, for Orthodox Jews,
Right.
the Talmud is actually even more important than the biblical text.
In the Torah?
That's right.
Really?
And the reason for that is that the Talmud explains the Torah as the Torah is not explained in its own script.
I see.
And for Orthodox Jews, let us say the Torah. Really, we'll say primarily the 5 books of Moses.
Right.
That's regarded as what we call in Hebrew Torah min hashamayim. That is, that came from God. All of those words came from God. Well, so it is with the explanations in the Talmud. But the explanations explain what God's word is, which means, for example,
are there various interpretations by various contributors to the Talmud?
There are some various interpretations.
Yeah.
There are various interpretations in some categories, but in other categories, in the Talmud, where we had debates that went on, it was, when there were debates, it was most often the majority vote that was regarded as the Word of God and became the explanation. Now, for example, the yeshivot, that is to say, the schools where rabbis are trained, ultimately where rabbis are trained, in the Orthodox seminaries, by far the greatest percentage of time is spent in study of the Talmud. Now, if we go to Reform Judaism in the United States, it's exactly the opposite. Since in Reform Judaism, the Talmud is not accepted as the explanation, as God's word, or as the explanation within that category of the Torah or the Bible. It's simply regarded as some additional Jewish writing. So
commentary.
So in, let us say, Hebrew Union College, where Reform rabbis are trained, those people in 4 years may be required to take 1 or 2 3-hour courses that deal with the Talmud, whereas in Orthodox seminaries, where they study to be rabbis for even more than 4 years beyond previous study that they've had, they may spend 75 to 80 to 85% of their time studying the Talmud.
I see.
So, so it's from the Talmud that we have most of the halakha, most of the religious law.
And all of these things are very important right now in Israel.
They're very important.
Important questions.
Those things are, the halakha, the religious law, the Talmud, are most important for Orthodox Jews. That then means, if we're talking about Israel, with which our book deals, that in Israel, for almost all of the Jews who are religious, even the ones who are traditionalists, who are not so religious in practice as the ultra-Orthodox, but for all of the religious, the Talmud is centrally important.
What percentage of the people in Israel would you guess, or would you say would be religious, as you put it, just including them all?
Well, let us say the breakdown, and we point this out in our text. The breakdown is probably something like this. There are roughly 20% of the Israeli Jewish population, by now 4.7 million or so Israeli Jews. There are roughly 20% that are very religious.
That's ultra-Orthodox?
Well, that fit within that category.
All right, very religious. All right,
very religious. Now, there are 20% that are on the other side of the spectrum, who are secular to the point that they are terribly anti-religious.
Yeah, they may be.
And then we have 50 to
Atheism.
60%,
Yeah.
50 to 60% who are traditionalists, who there's a variance, but they are not the most extreme anti-religious. At times, they will be in opposition to some things that some of the ultra-religious, the ultra-Orthodox say, but they are the traditionalists. So that is the breakdown of the population.
And
in this book, we're dealing, of course, mostly, not solely, but mostly with those ultra-Orthodox. But we're not dealing solely with them because, as I said before, their influence extends far beyond just this 20%. Their influence at times, because of their importance in the political scene of the time.
And the social scene, right?
And the social scene, their importance at times, their significance is a significance that is even influential with a number of Israeli Jews who are secularists at certain times.
I see. So that's a thing. You have a different. You had that's something that really needs to be understood. That the question of that. You had something. You and Dr. Shahak have had the notion that in order for the Jews to understand things, it's better if they could understand that there are myths that are involved around, like any group has myths and so forth. You had a thing in there about at Masada, that the people that were at Masada, that it was a different kind of myth that has grown up and is held by people now, relevant to what's going on. But in fact, they were people that were of not particularly great character or something. And that Dr. Shahak has said the Jewish religion, that the rabbis over the long haul, that we tend to see them as great thinkers and so forth, but that they exercised a tremendous oppression over many of the people that were who were subject to their authority. And that this is something, this traditional power of the Rebbe or of the rabbi is something that many people who are more secularly minded and so forth would be very nervous about that being established within Israel itself as a state, because they could become very oppressive. And that do you understand what I'm getting at?
Yes.
And is this something worth talking about? Is that something that you're concerned with in the book? To understand the Jewish history in real terms?
We are both of us personally, and then both of us as we wrote this book, we are terribly concerned with much of what you just said. There is some discussion of Masada and the people of Masada and that myth in the book, but let me go to the other part of what you said, and let me put it this way.
Yeah.
We have one chapter in the book that deals with Baruch Goldstein and the massacre in 1994 that this man committed in Hebron when he went into this area that was and is holy to religious Jews and to Muslims, and he killed 29 Palestinians, including children. We refer to Baruch Goldstein, and we also have the last chapter, our longest chapter, in which we talk about the Rabin assassination, and we talk about Yigal Amir, who was the person who committed the assassination. Now, Baruch Goldstein and Yigal Amir are the two most well-known Jewish assassins in the whole history of the modern state of Israel, by definition. We point out that both of them fit within the context, unfortunately, of many centuries of assassinations within Jewish populations, assassinations of those Jews, assassinations of those Jews by other Jews, assassinations of those Jews who were regarded as heretics and or sinners.
Right, and renegades.
And renegades.
Yeah.
And in fact, over many centuries, especially in those areas of the world in which there were autonomous Jewish communities and in which rabbis exerted great authority.
Yes.
Much of the time, the actual killings and torturings of heretics and sinners came from commands given by rabbis who pointed out that there were commandments in the Talmud, in the Halakha, commandments that heretics and sinners should both be killed and or should be tortured.
Like an Islamic fatwa.
That's correct. That's correct. I mean, there are some great similarities. There are some great similarities. So, and we also point out that most of this, almost all of this, to date, we think before our book, has simply not been put into the histories of Jews and to the histories of Judaism that have been written in English. These things do exist in a goodly number of the best and most scholarly works that are written in Hebrew. But of course, Hebrew is a limited language, and there are not so very many people in this world who read Hebrew fluently. So one of the reasons we wrote this book in English is that we felt that there should be, from within ranks, within ranks meaning both of us are Jews, and both of us are committed Jews in a good many ways, we believe that these things should be criticized. After all, Jews as well as other people are usually quick to criticize negative things that should be corrected in the histories of other people. We believe that Jews and others should be at least as quick to criticize things within their own histories, within their own past, that still exist today that also need to be corrected.
If we could all do that on a world scale, that might be the way toward world peace in a large measure. You get away from ethnic kind of identification in glorized kind of terms.
As you know, Harold, we say that in the book, and we say that in the preface, and we say that is one of the reasons we wrote this book.
Okay, since they're there, and it's a hot issue as far as it is Israel and that is concerned, what are some of the major things that as Jews, or as people, let's say American Jews who are looking at the situation as far as Israel is concerned, ought to address in that vein of being looking at things, the negative things that have not been brought out or that sort of thing? What should be revealed in a truthful kind of way as far as Jews are concerned that normally are not or are passed over or are propagandized against? What are some of the things you should bring up as a historian?
The general statement is, I believe, and Israel Shahak believes, and there are some others who also believe it, thank goodness, that, as I said before, individuals, Jews and non-Jews as well, should indeed criticize and condemn those negative things that have been in the past of their histories and that still exist today, with the idea that if we first identify them and then condemn them, that then we may be able to move on and correct them, and that is the positive approach. That's the general statement. Now, as we also have mentioned here in our conversation.
Well, I'll say here right now as just an Episcopalian American that George Washington did cut down the cherry tree. You know, I mean, that kind of myth. We have these myths, you know, that kind of thing, and they're myths. And there'd be more than. What are some of those that we should address so far as the Jewish fundamentalism and of the State of Israel and of these kind of things that we should address that would be good for us to clear the air and so forth of of what you're talking about?
Well, in regard to Jews in particular, and we point this
and
out
Israel and Zionism,
and Jews in particular, Israel and Zionism, as we point out in this book. Some of the things are there is a myth that throughout many centuries that Jews have been people who have been the most advanced intellectually, the most advanced in terms of modern study, and they have also been people who have not done what others have done.
Charles Murray says you're in the bell curve. He says you're just leading intellectually.
Well, yes, but not only that, but Jews are also people who have not done what we'll say Christians and Muslims have done at times, or some Christians and some Muslims have done. They have not killed for the purpose of religion. They have not been directed to kill by rabbis, to kill and to torture people because those people are heretics and sinners. The idea is, and this is a myth, they have not done things that Christians, Muslims, and people of other religions unfortunately have done.
Because they were persecuted.
As a matter of fact, Jews in the past, not all of them, not even a majority much of the time, but many of them have at times done these same things. Well, as a historian, first of all, one of the things to which I'm committed is that we should try, to the best of our ability, when we write histories, we should try to write the histories as accurately and as completely as possible.
Right.
So one of the myths here is that Jews have not done what other people have done. As a matter of fact, Jews have done what other people have done, and I, as a Jew, feel very strongly that if I am going to criticize and condemn people of other religions and people who are not religious for negative things that they have done, that I am also committed. I should also be committed to criticize my own people and to criticize my own people in terms of what has happened historically. So that is one of the myths. The myth. There is also this myth about advancement of knowledge. Indeed, we know there have been, for centuries, there have been some number of Jews who have advanced knowledge.
They sure
but
have.
Up until the fourth period of modern Jewish history, we can divide Jewish history into roughly 4 periods. The modern period is a period from the time of the emancipation. Before that, especially in those communities that were autonomous Jewish communities, actually the religious education, the Jewish religious education, most of the time held back the advancement of knowledge. Various parts of science and of what we call now the social sciences and the humanities, more recent terms, but those kinds of, but the subject matter that goes into those categories, those things, to study those things were regarded as being sinful. So we also have to rewrite this myth of what Jewish emphasis has been, even in regard to Jewish education.
Yeah, sure, and we've had that otherwise too. And they used to study, you know, the Bible with how many angels could dance on the head of the pin and so forth. And then we had an enlightenment. We had a thing. It was a general kind of thing. It was a growing intellectual understanding of the world and that sort of thing. But that should be understood. Also, the idea that the one thing, a central focusing issue in the modern, is the notion of the Jewish community as outside the pale of the traditional authorities in Europe and so forth, or beyond it, and they're doing that. And then the Holocaust, or the pogroms, that there were pogroms, constant pogroms. But in many cases, there were people that were bailiffs and were working with crowned heads and so forth, and that many of the Jewish people throughout most of the history did pretty well, more than was considered by many of the people. Or is that not correct? That's what I saw from the book that Israel Shahak had wrote.
Well,
then we have to bring it.
That's another large topic altogether. I would not say most. Look, Jews are most probably not different than other people. And other peoples that have been oppressed, in the histories of those people, we have examples of individuals from within the group who did a variety of things that actually led to even more oppression of their own people. Now,
all groups have done that.
All groups.
Yeah, right.
So I'm saying, yes, we have that with Jews, but we have that with others as well. It's not an apologia for Jews that we have it with others, and it should not be an apologia for others that we have it with Jews. I'm just saying here that, well, we have had it with Jews, and so therefore, if we are going to criticize and or condemn that kind of thing, then we have to criticize and condemn, and if we're Jews, we should not simply criticize and condemn non-Jews for having done this and gloss over, not mention Jews who have done it. We're also committed to mention the Jews who have done it.
But there was the notion that there were pogroms. There have been pogroms. Certainly in Europe there were. And there were these European, Russian pogroms. And then you had the absolute horror of the 30s in Europe. I mean,
we had the absolute
There's no, and then now you got these things. And that's something that is got to be addressed and is part of the fabric of what created Zionism.
Yes, after all, we did have the Holocaust, and we did have the near commission of genocide in a great part of Europe. Over 6 million Jews killed. Perhaps only the estimates are 200 to 250,000 who were left. That's almost genocide. So of course,
persecution.
That has to be emphasized. That is horrific. But when we emphasize it for the same time period, let alone for other time periods, we should not overlook the fact that there were indeed a good many others who were also killed by the Nazis. There were a good many other people who were also killed. In other words, this killing is not something that was limited only to Jews. So I'm saying, yes, we should have a continued consciousness of the Holocaust, but the consciousness of the Holocaust should be a consciousness that is not limited solely to Jews. And I want to say something else about this. The Holocaust, we'll say, occurred in the early 1940s, very late 30s and early 1940s. We are now at the end of the 1990s. And now, during the last 50 years of the existence of the State of Israel, every year without exception, the Holocaust has been used as something to help raise money and support for the State of Israel. Now, it seems to me, and it seems to a good many others as well, and a good many people who are Israeli Jews who have written in Hebrew, not translated into English for obvious reasons, it seems to us that this is, as it's been done, a misuse of the Holocaust.
Why?
It's a misuse of the Holocaust. It's a misuse of the Holocaust.
Because the Zionism was set up in order to make sure they could establish a strong status in the world and not have to subject themselves to that kind of thing that the Holocaust in the 1930s represented. And why is there not a tie between those two things? Is there not a tie in people's minds?
No. Well, there may be something in people's minds, but that is
not to be not to ever be so weak again that you're going to allow that to happen to the Jewish people.
That goes.
That's part of
no. That goes to the crux of the problem.
Okay.
Now, I mean, we're now moving into Zionism per se.
Zionism.
Israel was established within the framework of Zionist philosophy.
Surely. Herzl, 100 years
the
ago.
heart center of Zionist philosophy is an absolute theory of anti-Semitism. It's absolute.
What do you mean?
It's absolute, and I'll explain it. It's not difficult to explain. The absolute theory is that in those states wherein Jews are a minority, non-Jews will persecute Jews. If it hasn't happened yet, it will happen.
And it has happened in the past, they will say.
Well, they say it has happened. The argument is it's absolute. Why? Because they say Jews have been persecuted by non-Jews in all states and in all areas where Jews have been in a minority.
That's
has
virtually everywhere.
In the past. It's happened in the past, and or it's happening in the present, whenever the present is, and or it will happen in the future. That's the absolute theory of anti-Semitism.
Coming off the Second World War.
And so then the conclusion is that therefore and thereby, Jews need a nation state of their own,
Right.
where they start out as the majority,
Right.
hopefully of all the residents. But if not of all the residents, then of the citizens who control the state. They start out as a majority, and they must remain a majority. Because if they start out as a majority, and then they are, in some future time, they no longer are a majority, they're in a minority,
They'll be
then,
persecuted.
then we get this theory of persecution.
Yeah, right.
Now,
So?
well, wait, yeah, well, I'm coming to
All
say.
right.
Now, the criticism of
Yes.
that is
Yes.
that as much anti-Semitism and persecution of Jews that we've had in the past to date,
Yeah.
that does not prove that non-Jews, all non-Jews when they're in a majority in all nation states, necessarily hate Jews.
Yeah, but so
Also,
why give
wait,
them a chance?
wait.
Why not set
All
up
right.
in Israel and not give them a chance?
Wait,
You know?
wait.
All right.
Okay, wait. We'll come to that. We'll come to that. Now, also, this theory would have to mean that what we understand here in the United States, what most of us understand as a democratic society in which prejudices and discrimination such as anti-Semitism can be overcome democratically. Zionism stands opposed to that. It says, no, it can't, that can't be overcome because this is absolute. It's endemic to non-Jews to hate Jews.
Root and
Now,
branch, huh?
as a believer in democracy and as a believer in what democracy has not always been able to do but can do, I don't accept that theory, and I'm saying that the best way to fight anti-Semitism and/or other and/or prejudice,
Racism. Right.
prejudice, discrimination against any group of people is to do it in a democratic society. But now let me go further than that.
Go, Norton.
All right. Let us say that we have a state of it, which we do. We have a state of
Yes,
Israel.
and it's very strong.
Yes. Wait a minute. This state of Israel, yes, it is.
It's a
very
superpower.
strong. It is a superpower, largely made into a superpower by the United States.
All right, but it's
fine.
done.
Wait. But, indeed, if the theory of Zionism holds, then it will have to be, according to that theory, that at some point in the future, American society will become anti-Semitic. After all, we have 260 million plus people in the United States. We only have 6 million Jews.
Right.
It is simply not possible the Jews will ever be a majority here. They're in a minority.
Right, that's
if
sure.
we haven't had, we've had anti-Semitism, but if we haven't had the most severe kind, virile anti-Semitism, then according to Zionism, we're going to have it.
Yeah.
The state of Israel is strong. The state of Israel has been made strong by the United States.
And when that happens in the United States, they can go to Israel.
No,
They'll
wait
have
a
a
minute.
place to go.
Wait a minute.
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then the question is, how strong will the state of Israel be and remain when and if the United States turns anti-Semitic?
Well,
Now,
that's a question.
and therefore, it may not then be such a strong state.
Right.
And indeed, if I then go in another way to the Zionist argument.
You mean Israel would not be strong vis-a-vis the United States?
Well,
a raving anti-Semitic,
not only that,
anti-United
but
States.
Let me go at it another way. Let me go at it another way. And I'll now come and tie the Holocaust business into this.
Okay.
Every year.
Got about 10 minutes left.
All right. Every year. We barely got started.
Talking haiku sound bites.
Every year, when we have the big drive to collect money for the State of Israel from individuals, called the All-in-One Drive, we have it during Holocaust time period, the emphasis upon a Holocaust, and the idea is, the argument always is, give money for the State of Israel because these Jews live in such a precarious situation where they are. Now, Zionist theory says to us, however, that Jews are only going to be safe in the state where they are the majority. Now, in the state of Israel, the Jews are indeed the majority. They do have the Jewish state, so there is something topsy-turvy or inconsistent with this argument. If indeed you have that kind of state, then that kind of state is where Jews are safe. Well, the argument is not that these Jews are living in the safest place in the world for Jews. The argument is they're living in the most unsafe place for Jews in the world because of all the populations around them.
Well, that's because the populations around them won't be reasonable.
Wait a minute.
Why can't the populations around them be reasonable? And look at 200 atomic bombs.
It can't be both things at the same time. It can't be that Jews are only safe in the Jewish state where they are a minority, where they are a majority, and at the same time, Jews who live in the state where they are in a majority are living in the most unsafe place for Jews in the world. It can't be both ways.
Well, can things evolve?
Well, but you understand my point. Now, I come to what seems to me to be really a major point. And that major point is, after Israel became a state, this theory or philosophy of Zionism was legislated into the character of the state. What does that mean? It was legislated. There's no constitution in the state of Israel, so there's nothing above the law. So the law is supreme. It was legislated. Those laws give rights and privileges to Jews that are not given to non-Jews, not even to those non-Jews who are citizens of the state. Now, we have had and still have the leaders of this state, these Zionist leaders, as well as a good many others, who tell us Israel is a democracy. Israel is the only
democracy in the Midwest.
Well, that's the argument.
That's what they're saying.
Israel is a terribly democratic state in many ways if one is a Jew. But if one is not a Jew, Israel is one of the most anti-democratic states that we have. It's an anti-democratic state because, again, by law, there are rights and privileges given to Jews that are not given to non-Jews. Not even to talk yet about all the oppression of the Palestinians that has been severe oppression within the context of Zionism. So, as a Jew and as a human being, I'm critical of that kind of philosophy. I'm critical of that kind of philosophy legislated into the character of a state. I'm critical of those laws that grant rights and privileges to one group of people, not granted to another group of people. And finally, let me say this. There are only two nation states in the world, governments of nation states, that presume to speak for me, for Norton Mezvinsky. One is the United States because I'm an American citizen. The other is the state of Israel. Why? Because in their laws, in their Declaration of Independence, that state says it is the state of all the Jews of the world. I don't believe that. But if I don't believe that, if that state presumes to say it, then I'm saying that I feel I have an obligation to speak up against those negative, I have more of an obligation to speak up against negative acts committed by the two nation states that presume to speak for me. Because if I don't speak up against them, then the presumption is that I am part of that. I'm not part of it. So if I'm going to be critical, as I sometimes am, of the government of the United States, then I also feel that as a Jew, I need to be critical of policies of the state of Israel that are discriminatory and oppressive.
But won't you have it thrown at you that you're being anti-Semitic if you're anti-Zionist? And if you're anti-Zionist, that equates as being anti-Semitic, and you're just like that. Is that not thrown at people if they take that position? And what about the one thing?
That should not deter me. That should not deter me.
No, but you understand what I'm saying. That's the thing that will be thrown at you right away.
I not only understand, but there have been decades when that has happened. As you can see, it hasn't quite made me quiet.
No, not quite. No. So what is the answer? I mean, one thing, we only got a few minutes left, but the ultimate thing, if you were to go back to the Orthodox, the ultimate position, when Herzl announced it, everyone was against the idea, partly because it said they would interpret the Torah to say that if there's going to be an ingathering at the end of time, it should be done in a totally just world and with totally no peace, with no weapons, no destruction, nothing like that, that it was too soon. There should not be the state. And they were against the idea of Zionism from the beginning. And then slowly, the rabbis and the Zionists were a small group. And then they got more and more support. And then the state was established and more people came over. Schneerson's father-in-law was anti-Zionist, just like the Natura Carta. So the Natura Carta is still there against the idea, root and branch, that the State of Israel should have been established in the first place.
Well,
but now, State of Israel is established. It's a fact. What are we going to do about it? What do we do about it? You have this objection. What do we do about the fact that these Arab states and these other states won't recognize and let the Jewish state be peacefully living there in the what is now called Israel? Or what do we do about the reality?
Well, I'm going to try in a minute or two.
You've got actually 6 minutes.
Okay. Well, I'll try in a part
Round
of those 6
it up
minutes,
yeah.
right, to answer what you've just asked, which really falls into two categories.
Yeah.
Or what you've commented upon.
Is Zionism legal or legitimate?
No, well, wait. First of all, indeed, the great majority of Orthodox rabbis were anti-Zionist, not at the time that the state was declared, but earlier than that. Mm-hmm. They were anti-Zionist in the 1920s, anti-Zionist in the 1930s, mm-hmm. until the end of the 30s, into the time of the Holocaust, mm-hmm. and so on.
Okay.
And then some of them remained mm-hmm. anti-Zionist and some did not.
Mm-hmm.
They were anti-Zionist for the reasons that you barely mentioned, that we discussed in much fuller depth in this book.
Not because it was anti-Torah.
No. Well, they were anti-Zionist primarily.
Yeah.
They were anti-Zionist primarily because they emphasized three oaths that are very important in Jewish religious law and had been for many centuries, going back to the 2nd century of the Common Era. And these three oaths said that, well, the major emphasis was that Jews would not and should not have their Jewish state restored until the Messiah came.
Right.
And the Messiah hadn't come, and it was therefore sinful to try to create a Jewish state before the kingdom of God on earth and the coming of the Messiah.
Right, and the Torah had laid out under the terms under which that would be done, and those terms were not there.
The other reason they opposed it, which you also made reference to, was that the great majority of Zionist leaders, the great majority of them, were secularists and were anti-religious.
Right.
So, of course, their point was, how can we possibly say that they're going to create the state that we need, the state of the Messianic age and so on. Now, we had, however, a small group of Jews and a small group of rabbis who were religious Zionists, and they had their own rationale as to how you could rationalize all of this. Mm-hmm. We discussed that in the book. I don't have time to go into it.
No, you only got 4 minutes.
Well, all right. What then happened? What then happened was that if we take the larger group of the Orthodox Jews, throughout the world, the religious Jews,
some of these are fundamentalists.
That's right.
Yeah.
If we take the largest number of those Jews, their rabbis, once the state of Israel came into existence, they made their compromises with the state of Israel.
Yeah.
They made their compromises with the state of Israel
group
for
by group.
some rather selfish reasons. Right. They wanted to be in the government because if they were in the government, their main concern was to get money and financing for their religious schools.
Right, it became a winner.
Which they did.
Right. Except for the Natura Carta.
Yes, wait.
Yeah.
But most of them said, we are not only accepting the state, we're not only going to play a part in the government of the state.
We're going to take it over.
But, they wanted to work for that.
That's what you're worried about.
But they also said, we are not Zionists. They still argued they were not Zionists. All right, now. So we had that. Now, what are we, the second question, or the second part of your comment had to do with, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Well, I can give you a personal answer.
All right,
not only for myself, but I'll give you a personal answer for myself as a Jew.
All right, fine.
Where I think we should go is, where I think I should go and where I think we should go.
And this book would encourage.
That's right. I think we should do our best to emphasize and to advocate those things that are right things for human beings, not just for Jews. We should try to emphasize human rights, and we should try to emphasize human rights within democratic settings.
Access for all.
And we should be critical and condemnatory on human rights grounds of the denial of human rights, not just to Jews, but to all human beings. So, as a human being first, but then also as a Jew, I would say that I feel, as I have felt, an obligation and a responsibility to be critical of those people, whether they be Jews or non-Jews, who want to deny basic human rights to other people. And I am sufficiently hopeful that this kind of emphasis can indeed lead to positive change.
Yeah, and you think you're also strong enough in your own identity to be able to take the slings and arrows that somebody might want to throw at you and be able to be self-critical, and people should be strong enough in order to be self-critical of their situation or their group or their individual personality. That's
I do believe that.
That's a sign of strength.
I do believe that. I do believe that, and I've had to believe that and be that way for well over 3 decades.
Yeah, all right, well, like you're like that. But it's very difficult. But there is a danger that's worried about, as far as Israel is concerned, is that the fundamentalists or the Orthodox would take over, as it were, the state, and if they did, they would create a state that would be detrimental to the democratic beliefs that you are so
in our book, that's why we wrote the book, and that we wrote the book because we are indeed critical of Jewish fundamentalists. But I must also say that there are secularists who are terribly anti-religious, who are opposed to the fundamentalists, who are in their ways also discriminatory. They are also people who need to be opposed on human rights human rights grounds. We, however, focus in this book upon the Jewish fundamentalists who we think are among the most dangerous of
people in the world.
That's right.
And that's something to be said.
They are
and they should be looked up to.
They are dangerous. They are dangerous. Jewish fundamentalists are dangerous, we believe, just as Islamic fundamentalists are dangerous, just as Christian fundamentalists are dangerous, and just as people who are fundamentalists within this category of definition that we deal with in this book anywhere in the world.
Xenophobia is xenophobia.
That's
right. All right. And one last thing, Jerusalem. Jerusalem should be a universal city, or what are we going to do about Jerusalem in this cauldron of things and situations there? What's going to happen in the final state of Jerusalem?
Perhaps we need another 1-hour conversation with Harold Channer.
We got 30 seconds. We got 30 seconds
to discuss that issue.
That issue. All right. We'll have to do another conversation, but that's going to be a big issue. It will be, like that. Anyway, thank you, Norton.
You're welcome.
Only just got started. There's a lot of things
we
we're
only
going to talk about. The big issue. The book is fantastic, of course. Once again, let's let people see what it looks like. And it's just about be out now in September, right?
Yes.
September 99, right in time
for
the
and
millennium.
I would encourage them
a little light reading.
to go into the store and to ask for it.
And
it's not light reading.
No, no, but it's really well written. It's very interesting. I can testify to that. And it's Jewish fundamentalism in Israel, and it's been co-authored by Israel Shahak, a legend in terms of the intellectual community there, and by Norton Mezvinsky, who's been our guest. We thank you for viewing, and please, we've been able to help share his perceptions with you. We invite you to tune in. We'll be coming back again next week. That's it for now. Norton, once again, thanks again for coming into the studio.
Thank you
and
for
all your work over the years.
Thank you.
Until next time. So much to go. We just did 2 weeks ago. We aired a program with Israel Dome.
Oh.
With that book, The Transformation. Did you ever read his book?
Yes, I have.
Boy, he takes that. He takes that position as being, that was a big transformation. The Natura Carta, did they figure in, or is it gone? Or what?
No, Natura Carta is still there.
They're the last ones who are still saying, they're so anti-Zionist. It's amazing.
They are, but they're a part of a larger community of the Satmar Hasidic group that is anti-Zionist, but they are the extreme element. I agree with you.
You think they're fundamentalists?
Oh, they are fundamental. There's no question of that.
Yeah.